My minutes are numbered. As I write this, I can hear them outside. They have started to mimic my parents, and as I don't respond, the pounding on the door gets louder. It just keeps getting louder and louder until eventually the screams outweigh the pounding. I think I'm going mad. I don't think they can get in for now, and hopefully this documentation of my experience will help someone. I recently moved to the middle of nowhere. I know, it's a horror movie cliché, and if I knew the events that would transpire in the next week, I would have just moved back in with my parents. The house itself? Amazing. It's a nice 2-story house in the middle of a forest. I'm a veterinarian, so I make a fairly decent living, plus the house wasn't that bad of a price. I got a job in the vet clinic in town, and moved into my new home. The first 2 days went great. I unpacked, and on the 3rd day I started my job at the clinic. It was a great first day, but it was also a slow day, so it gave me plenty of time to get to know my co-workers. When I closed up and headed home for the night, a thick fog began to roll in, and at the time I thought it was just my post-work exhausted mind, but I could have swore that I saw something moving in the trees. I would have just shrugged it off as a deer, or otherwise some other forest animal, but it looked too human-like. It creeped me out, and not wanting to take any chances, I hurried into my house, locked the door, and then proceeded to look through my blinds, trying to identify anything moving in the bleak black of the night. Nothing, just the trees and the fog. After that, I went through my entire house to make sure nothing was out of the ordinary. Called me paranoid, I know. How ironic a deeply paranoid person is living in the middle of the woods, alone. After I made sure that everything was in the ordinary, I pushed it to the back of my mind and I went to bed. The next day I was rudely awoken to a loud bang. I shot up out of bed and grabbed the baseball bat at the side of my bed. As quietly as I could, I slowly headed downstairs before I heard a second bang at my front door. I peeked through the blinds and was met with a horrifying sight. A man wearing a deer head, holding a machete. I ran upstairs, grabbed my phone, and called 911. It took them 30 minutes to arrive, but I could have sworn a full lifetime had passed as I sat quietly in my room, praying that that thing didn't manage to get in. And by the time the police had arrived, the person had vanished. I assumed back to its home, in the woods. I met with the officer outside and explained to her what had happened. Yeah, this isn't the first time this has happened in this forest. What we can do here is do a walkthrough of the forest, and if this happens again, please don't hesitate to call. This isn't the first time this has happened? I wouldn't worry about it. It's probably another homeless person on drugs, or just kids playing pranks. Again, if anything else happens, don't hesitate to call us. I didn't really understand how a man wearing a deer head with a machete was a homeless person out of their mind, nor did I appreciate the humour in some kids picking me as their current target for a cheap joke. Before I could say anything else to her, however, I saw her get into her car, and with that she was gone, and I was once again alone outside my house. Understandably, I was pretty weirded out by the whole experience, but before I could think about it further, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked my watch and realised I had work in an hour and a half. I got dressed and headed out. Another long day. Again, I got home late that night, but tonight ended up being quite different in one huge way. As I approached my house, I noticed something very alarming. My front door was wide open. I didn't even bother mentally playing with the idea that I'd accidentally let it open this morning. I just called the police. Once they got there, both officers told me to wait and entered my house. Apparently, there was blood on the hallway walls leading to my bedroom. I told the officers what had happened that morning, and they seemed to be a bit disturbed. But they didn't really look as surprised as I would have liked. They told me that this could be a cult connection, and that since these two incidents happened just hours between each other, they were going to station an officer outside my house to help keep watch. That relieved me a bit, but the blood on my wall really kind of freaked me out. It took hours, with my already tired body begging me to rest at every drain of the mob, but I eventually got the walls clean again, and finally gave in to the idea of sleep. After tossing and turning for what felt like hours, I finally did fall asleep. The next day I woke up, and the officer was gone. I made a cup of coffee and texted my parents. They were really worried about me and kept telling me that they wanted me to come move back in to our hometown, but I couldn't just drop my new job and abandon my home. I told them that I'd keep them updated, and that I'd stay safe. And not long after, I got a knock at my front door. I froze. After yesterday, I was on edge, and so I went to the blinds and peered through. It was Officer Bailey. I opened the door, and what she told me next made my whole body go cold. The officer stationed outside my house was missing. Apparently, they found his car in a ditch about a 10-minute drive from my house, with a blood trail ending in the middle of the forest. She asked me if I saw anything, and I said no. After she left, I considered leaving town. This was all too much. Almost a week into living here, and I'd already become the center of a murder investigation? I did my best to calm down, and decided to try to enjoy the rest of my day off. Surprisingly, the rest of the day passed quite well. I made dinner, watched a little TV, and as the day was starting to wind down, I'd almost forgotten about all the chaos that had occurred over the last few days. That was until I saw that man again, walking through the forest, holding a bloody machete. I saw him look towards my window, and I quickly ducked out of sight. When I dared to look back up, he was gone. Unfortunately, what replaced him was at least 20 people walking up to my house, some of them wearing masks, but the ones that weren't wearing masks had impossibly wide smiles on their faces, with bloodshot eyes. Or, in a couple of cases, they didn't seem to have a face at all. I, understandably, was terrified. I heard glass break downstairs, and I sprinted to my bedroom door, abandoning any idea of simply staying unseen. As a last line of defense, I knocked my dresser in front of my door, and turned to find anything I could use as a weapon. I grabbed my baseball bat, and my phone. I called the police, but this time I got no answer. My mind was racing, and I heard footsteps moving through my house. I heard heavy footsteps walking up my stairs, and then I heard the voice. It was the one voice I didn't expect to hear right now. It was Officer Bailey, and she was trying to get me to come out. I ignored her and stayed silent. I didn't really know what to trust. After a few minutes, the thing pretending to be Officer Bailey started banging on the door and screaming. Now, it's been 16 hours since they arrived. They're getting smarter, and I found myself close to moving the dresser and opening the door. The screaming is getting longer, the banging more intense, and something cut the electricity. The light from the screen of my phone is now my only source of light. I must be going insane. I can hear my parents out there, telling me it's alright, and it's safe to come out. I don't know what to do. I feel hopeless. The dresser is moving with each unrelenting pound on the door. Honestly, I had mixed feelings about this one. At first, I wasn't too sure about the overall pacing of the story. in places does feel a little bit rushed. But when I stopped thinking about it as a supernatural story, and more so of the protagonist having some kind of mental breakdown from the stress of moving to, as he admits, a cliché home in the middle of nowhere, I think it started to make a lot more sense that way. Not bad, SomePerson. That's the name of the author, by the way. I look forward to, hopefully, a part 2. As always, y'all, hope you enjoyed the read. Please drop me a comment if there's anything in particular you'd like me to make a video on, and remember to keep it spooky until the next one.